Welcome into the On3 studios here in Nashville, Tennessee. It is the Wiltfong Whip Around with Steve Wiltfong. Today is Monday, June 10th. I'm your host, Josh Newberg, and we got a ton of official visit action to talk about today. There's also some big commitments that went down over the weekend, like defensive lineman Christian Garrett to Georgia, Timothy Merritt to Miami, and safety Fahim Delaney to Ohio State. We got a lot of five-star intel today on the Whip Around, but before we get into it, you guys hit subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel, your best source of recruiting anywhere on YouTube. Go ahead, hit subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel. All right, let's bring on Steve Wiltfong. And Steve, you had the On3 Recruit Prediction Machine buzzing on Sunday into Monday morning. You wrote about it in the latest Whip Around article on the front page of on3.com. You guys can go check that out right now. But in today's show, we are going to cover the five-star intel, and there's a bunch of five stars on the move this weekend. Let's start with number one wide receiver Dakorien Moore. Now, Dakorien Moore, it's an interesting recruitment because 3 weeks ago, the number one wide receiver in America decommitted from LSU. This weekend, he was back on campus, and we want to know if LSU has a shot at getting the number one wide receiver back on their commit list.
Well, I had a chance to talk to Dakorien Moore's mother, Marjan Moore, late Sunday night about the experience. Billy Embody from our LSU affiliate at On3 spoke with Dakorien. The returns are strong coming from both of them. I also talked to a couple sources in Baton Rouge that spent some time with the Moore family. They think they're in the top two. And talking to Marjan Moore, reading Billy's interview with Dakorien, I certainly wouldn't argue that. However, the Moore family, they have great personalities. They really like the four schools in play. So I think if you make calls to people around Columbus, calls to people around Eugene, and certainly people around Austin, everyone feels optimistic about their position. So that tells me this is going to be a tough decision in the end for Dakorien Moore because he really likes his four finalists. But regarding LSU, he was the only visitor on campus this past weekend, Josh. Marjan Moore told me that solo OVs are the new wave and more families should do it. Not many families are going to get that type of treatment. No. Dakorien Moore, one of the elite players in the country, the number one receiver, five-star plus prospect, very important to LSU as they try and build on a recruiting class ranked number 2 nationally. They brought him in, tried to remind him why he committed to LSU in the first place. Jamar Chase is his favorite player. He's building a relationship with him. They love the track record of receiver development at LSU. His mom called it the electrifying receivers that have come out of there beforehand. They just got a lot of that one-on-one time with Coach Hankton, Coach Joe Sloan, certainly Brian Kelly. They left LSU feeling very good about the Tigers. We know LSU is going to be competitive in all arenas with Dakorien Moore moving forward in this recruitment. He still has his official visits to Texas and Oregon coming up, was already at Ohio State. But LSU, they went from decommitment, not on the official visit list, to him canceling overtime OT7, getting LSU on the visit list this past weekend, to being blown away by a great, intimate official visit. And don't count the Tigers out for him moving forward. Don't count him out for Jamie French. Don't count him out for Khalil Lockett. LSU trying to sign one of the best receiver classes in the country. They have the top quarterback in the boat in Bryce Underwood, and now they're in the thick of it again for Dakorien Moore.
Yeah, 3 weeks ago when Dakorien Moore decommitted from LSU, we were talking about the trio of five stars in Khalil Lockett, Jamie French, and Dakorien Moore, now trending to Texas. But 3 weeks later, even after the decommitment, it still feels like LSU has a real shot to sign that trio as well. You said he's got 2 more visits to go. Do you think that he told us he's going to make a decision this summer, probably in July at some point? Do you think that in the end, this LSU visit might be too far in the rear view, or was it such a great trip, that one-on-one interaction, that this will last up until he makes his final decision?
Well, I think he's going to try and make his final decision before his senior season, before they go out there and defend that state championship at Duncanville. So LSU, they were just trying to fit in, Josh. They weren't even on the itinerary, so they took what they could get and then crushed it. And look, again, he committed to LSU, so there were some fond feelings for LSU. He just needed to go back and see some more intricacies of the program, how they develop their players, what they do academically. And I think LSU crushed that. And he's going to make his decision before the season. But these schools are all going to stay on top of them
Mm-hmm.
because games are going to be played, seasons are going to be fluid. And anytime a prospect decommits, I think that they become someone that schools just stay on all the way to the finish line. And that will be the case with Dakorien Moore, no matter what he decides to do in late June or July,
Yeah.
whatever he decides to do before his senior season. These schools that don't hear their names called the second time are still going to try and stay in communication and see what happens during the fall.
All right, LSU fans, Texas fans even, how we feeling about Dakorien Moore after this latest visit? Let us know, comment section below. Georgia, they had a massive group on campus. Already one commitment from the weekend. Bogart, Georgia defensive lineman Christian Garrett jumped in the boat, but there was a couple 5-stars, and that's who we're here to talk about in this video. Now, let's start with offensive tackle David Sanders. Coming off that Clemson visit, everybody thought the childhood favorite, for the number one offensive tackle in North Carolina. Everybody thought that maybe this Clemson visit could be the one. Coming out of it, though, do you feel like Clemson is in that top group, and now that David Sanders has been to Georgia?
Josh, you and I didn't think that. We thought that David Sanders and his family put together a process, and they're going to stick to their script, which is taking all the official visits, continuing to dot I's, cross T's, get back to schools that they've seen numerous times, get back around their coaching staffs, and just continue to see where he feels most comfortable. These programs that are in the mix, he knows he could be successful at all of them. He's got Tennessee this coming weekend, Alabama, then Ohio State on the back end, and then maybe he goes into decision mode. I think Georgia, Ohio State, and Tennessee, those are the three that I'm continuing to watch the most. That doesn't mean that I'm discounting Clemson. I'm not discounting South Carolina, Alabama, and then Nebraska got that official on Mother's Day weekend. And so those are the other 4 programs in the mix. But Georgia has always been one of his favorites. He said as much as the On3 Elite Series. They've been at the top or near the top for pretty much his entire process. He loves the way they compete, the way they practice, the way they pour into their players on the field and off the field. He's built some good relationships with that recruiting class, particularly Mason Short, who has come back to Athens the last 2 times David Sanders has been there, the Kirby Smart scavenger hunt, and then this weekend. So Georgia is one of the front runners. I say this all the time, but when you're one of the top players in the country, certainly NIL is a component in these decisions. I think Georgia's prepared to be in the mix there for David Sanders as well. So you got these 3 programs, Bulldogs, Vols, and Buckeyes, battling for the elite offensive tackle from Charlotte. He's got a couple more visits coming up, and then we'll see where the chips fall after those trips.
All right. Now, heading into this weekend, I called Georgia a sleeper for DJ Pickett. I know teams thought it was Oregon, but Oregon's very much in the mix. But I kind of felt like not a lot of people were talking about DJ Pickett in UGA. But heading into this visit, the number 2 cornerback in the country, he's higher on Georgia than a lot of people give him credit for, huh?
Well, I think that when you spend time around DJ Pickett and his family, like we did at the On3 Elite Series, you get the sense that the Georgia program is he's built for that place.
Yeah.
And I talked to his dad Monday morning about the official visit, and he said it was what we expected. Georgia is different. They showed us how they go about their work. That's what it's all about at Georgia, putting in work, trusting what they say and do, and just grinding, and then the results will come. Now, if Fran Brown was still the defensive backs coach at Georgia, that was his initial relationship, I think we'd be talking about Georgia being in pole position. There's been some transition with that staff, but he's close with some of these other coaches. Dante Williams has taken the baton and ran with it for Georgia since being hired from USC. And they've known Coach Travaris Robinson for 3 years from his time at Miami and Alabama. So there's comfort level around those guys. LSU, I think, has really set the tone in this recruitment with some visits this calendar year, including his official visit the first weekend of June. He's got Oregon and Miami coming up, not in that order. Miami's this weekend, Oregon the following weekend. The decision date is October 5th, Josh. He wants to watch teams play this fall. Florida got an unofficial visit this summer. The official is locked in for Florida and Miami. That's going to be an awesome season opening game and one that could have some recruiting
implications.
Implications, thank you, for DJ Pickett. but they're going to get back to Georgia. He said we will be back at Georgia before October 5th. And so Georgia's certainly a team to watch, just like they are for linebacker Ty Jackson. I'm going off script on you real quick,
Let's
Josh.
go.
But I talked to Ty Jackson's dad, On3's #1 ranked linebacker, right before we got on the air here. He said it was a good visit as always. Talked about Georgia being #1 on the totem pole in college football. They're the team to beat. Everybody calling Kirby Smart the GOAT since Saban retired. He said they're that team, they're that program, they're that brand everybody is striving for. And just to know your son has the opportunity to be in that type of environment and atmosphere is an honor, and it's a good feeling. He's at Florida this coming weekend. That's a change from Florida State. He's at Alabama at the end of the month. Penn State got the first visit. I look at Georgia and Alabama as two programs that are in really good position. And if Florida has a great year, if Florida comes out and beats Miami, this coaching staff connects with recruits as well as anybody. DJ Pickett, Ty Jackson, they could be Gator stock up if they can come out and beat Miami. If kids commit elsewhere in the summer, if Florida has the year they want to have this year, there's no panic in that Florida football facility. If they come out and have the year that they think they're going to have, they can come back around on some guys committed elsewhere. But DJ Pickett, Ty Jackson, two elite players keeping a close eye on the Gators.
All right. Now, we're going to talk more about Georgia because you put in an RPM pick. But right now, I want to head down to Gainesville. Let's talk about the 2 5-stars that were on campus in Gainesville. Florida Gators hosted a bunch of visitors. Go to gatorsonline.com for more. But, Steve, you and I are going to talk about Caleb Cunningham and safety Trey McNutt. Now, wide receiver Caleb Cunningham, he's the top player in Mississippi. He's a 5-star wide receiver, and he's been to Gainesville before. This was not his first time. He's familiar with Billy Napier and his staff. Caleb Cunningham, is Florida a legit threat to land him?
Well, I've talked to Caleb Cunningham, a very excited Caleb Cunningham, Sunday afternoon coming out of his official visit. He called me to talk about his visit, and he gave it a 10.5 out of 10. Again, Billy Napier, that receiver background, that coaching staff, the way they build relationships, the energy that they have, when kids get to Gainesville, they really feel that. And Caleb Cunningham is one of those 5-stars that had a fantastic time. And we just talked about that in the last segment. If Florida has the kind of year that they want to have this year, even if they lose a recruiting battle here in the summer, they come back around on a Drake Stubbs who's committed to USC. They're going to battle for Caleb Cunningham here, the 5-star receiver. And I think as of late, Caleb Cunningham's taken a lot of visits. He took that official visit to Auburn to open the month and told Jeff Lee and those guys over at our Auburn On 3 affiliate that Auburn was the leader. Caleb doubled down on that with me in an interview a couple days later. But he visited Ole Miss and had a great experience with Ole Miss midweek on an unofficial. And now he may go to Juice Weekend in Oxford in July instead of Big Cat Weekend at Auburn in July. So that certainly got me thinking that this recruitment is very fluid, one where we've liked Mississippi State early, and we're certainly not ruling out for the local target moving forward. But then Florida, the visit he just had there, 10.5 out of 10. They're in the middle of it. He'll be watching them closely this season. Alabama's getting him on campus at the end of the month. Him and Derek Meadows are their two coveted receivers that they want to add to this top 10 recruiting class right now. So certainly we know Jamarcus Shepard, Kalen DeBoer and company could maybe make a move at the end of the month. But Florida gave Caleb Cunningham a great visit. And they did the same with 5-star safety Trey McNutt. You know, McNutt was on campus this weekend, and I had Florida kind of trailing coming in behind schools like Texas A&M, USC, Oregon, and Ohio State. Georgia rising after a recent visit. Florida, he did visit in the spring, came back, said he had a great time this weekend, and talked about what Florida does for the players outside of football. We know it's a great academic school and the support that they give their players, but he likes the defensive coaches, said Will Harris and company is a great group, and these guys are going to build Florida back up strong. They like the vision that Napier and company have. He is another that is watching Florida closely, and we'll see what kind of year the Gators have, because if Florida doesn't do it on the field this fall, they're on the short list for these prospects like Trey McNutt, but they got to go out and produce. Trey McNutt's not going to commit till the fall either. I think you'll see him take summer visits moving forward to Texas A&M and Oregon. In this fall, I think you'll see him get back to Georgia and get back to Ohio State, which gives Florida time to get off to a great start this season.
Yeah, and speaking of getting off to a great start, that opener with Miami, Florida hosting Miami in the Swamp for that season opener, just an unbelievable matchup. You think it's possible? I know these are official visits, so they can't come back on officials, but do you think we could see a guy like a Caleb Cunningham, a Trey McNutt back in the Swamp for a game of that magnitude?
Josh, you and I both know that even though summer officials are being taken, these prospects will pop back up on campuses of their top schools, even if they're committed elsewhere for games this fall.
All right. Well, Steve, I think just because there's going to be so many recruits down there, maybe you and I need to take a field trip down to the Swamp and watch the season opener against Miami.
Wiltfong whip around from inside the Swamp that Thursday, leading into Florida, Miami that Saturday. Let's get it booked.
With a live audience. It'd be great. All right, let's move on. Actually, first, Gator fans, let me know. How do we feel about these 5 stars on campus? Are the Gators trending? Do you think who will be the first 5-star wide receiver to link up with DJ Lagway down in Gainesville? Comment section below. Let us know. All right, let's head to College Station where Texas A&M had another massive visit weekend. We're going to talk about the 5 stars on campus for the Aggies, and let's start with a couple offensive tackles. You got Ty Haywood and Michael Fasusi, both prospects from the state of Texas. Are the Aggies a legit threat to hold on and keep them in state?
At least the 3rd visit since Mike Elko was hired in College Station for Ty Haywood. At least the 4th visit, I believe, for Michael Fasusi. I had a chance to talk to Michael Fasusi on Sunday night, and he's like, man, just love being there, seeing what the program is about. He talked about the family feel around it, the bonds he has up there, especially with the new coaching staff. He emphasized they show love up there. He talked about the resources A&M has. He said the Aggie network is real for sure, and he likes the chance to be developed under Adam Cushing, their offensive line coach. He says they're for sure in the mix. They're trying to get that number 1 spot. I think Missouri's doing what they can to lure Fasusi, Lamont Rogers, guys like that out of the Lone Star State. But Texas A&M, he's at Oklahoma this weekend. Those are the 3 I'm probably watching the closest in the Fasusi battle. Ty Haywood, Alabama really moved the needle last weekend. Oklahoma's been a mainstay for him as well. But A&M getting him and his mom to campus so many times this calendar year has thrusted them into the mix. It was just a 5-star weekend in general for the Aggies, Josh.
It really was. Yeah. Now let's talk about Jonah Williams, because when he was here in Nashville about 10 days ago, he was not shy about his interest in Texas A&M. This weekend he was on campus. Was there any chance, now he did not commit, but were you on commit watch at all with Jonah Williams, or did you think he was going to stick to his plan, take all his visits?
He's sticking with this process in his upcoming visits, which is LSU this weekend and then Oregon the following weekend. But Jonah Williams is the number 1 recruit on Texas A&M's football board, the number 1 recruit on their baseball board. He is just a fantastic all-around athlete that also shines in basketball, roll out of bed, really good at anything that he does. Filled the stat sheet on offense, defense, and special teams for Galveston ball in the fall. I talked to his dad, Billy Williams, late Sunday night. Look, their older son signed with Texas A&M to play baseball. They know Mike Evans well, that family. They like that it's not too far from home. He talked about the track records that Coach Elko, Coach Ish, and people have on their resumes defensively. And A&M being in the super regional for baseball, looking for more. Those are all things that have Texas A&M in the thick of it. Obviously, that's where my on-3 RPM is. But Texas A&M, they're going to have to battle to sign him. LSU, Oregon, USC had a great visit last weekend. Those are just some of the other contenders for Jonah Williams, who him and his family sitting their first rodeo. They got kids in professional baseball. They're going to be meticulous. Dad's a judge, a lawyer. They're very thorough in their process here. But A&M are continuing to impress on all fronts. They've gotten him to campus a bunch of times this year.
Yeah, and he told us baseball is going to play a huge factor. This isn't a baseball decision. Baby. This isn't a football decision. It's both. So right now it looks like Texas A&M, but like you said, a couple more visits to go for Jonah Williams, so we'll see what happens there. All right, why don't we just stay in the state of Texas but move to a different city? Let's head over to Austin, where they had 5-star athlete Michael Terry III. Michael Terry, a really intriguing prospect. He's built like a rush end or a linebacker, but he tells us that he probably wants to end up on the offensive side of the ball. Now, Texas going with the approach, hey, you're an incredible athlete. We just want to get you on campus. However it works out, it works out. Now that the visit's over, what are you hearing on Michael Terry's recruitment?
Well, I think that Texas is kind of coming around to, as they get to know Michael Terry better, let's just get you here and we're going to recruit you as an athlete. And he talked about Coach Milwee kind of leading that charge from the offensive staff. And he's really built a good connection with Coach Sarkisian. And he said it's best to just keep playing me as an athlete and not limiting him to one position and wasting his talent. He sent me a bunch of photos from his visit, man. He just loved being around the staff, loved being around the players in the locker room. I know that his dad is connected with Ryan Wingo's dad, Ronnie Wingo. So there's already some connections there with parents within the program, speaking highly of Texas. And that's all resonating with Michael Terry. Colleague Chad Simmons and I, in our Best Guess article that we did recently, we predicted Michael Terry to Texas A&M. That doesn't mean we were sleeping on Nebraska, who's recruiting him the hardest, or Oregon, but we just thought that things were resonating with Texas A&M. But now we're starting to get more clarity on Texas, how they're recruiting him. And he just had a fantastic visit in Austin this weekend. And it would not be surprising to see him also end up in the burnt orange.
All right. Well, let's head out of Texas and go out to California, where Julian Lewis made a very important visit back to USC, the team that he is committed to. Now, 5-star quarterback Julian Lewis was in town, and there was 19 official visitors, including him, so 18 others. Why was this visit so important for Julian Lewis?
Well, anytime he can get back around Lincoln Riley and just be in that setting in person with Coach, it makes him more and more comfortable with his decision. Certainly, he knows on paper what Lincoln Riley has done, from the first-round draft picks to the Heisman Trophy winners, and the all-but guarantee that if you start for him, those are in your future. But Lincoln Riley just has this coolness to him. He just makes his players feel so comfortable that when Julian Lewis and his family get back around Coach Riley, it just makes them feel really good about the decision to commit to USC so early. And USC, they invested in Julian Lewis more than any other school. And what I mean by that is, if you look at all his other finalists, they offered other quarterbacks. Lincoln Riley knew Julian Lewis was ultimately going to be a reclassify, and he did not offer a 2025 or 2026 while Julian Lewis was in the 2026 class. Bryce Underwood thought about visiting USC. You're a talented player, but don't come out. We're on Julian Lewis. So that investment is big. But I think for this visit in general, not only that for Julian Lewis, for him to get out there, see that USC is the number 3 recruiting class in the country. They want to believe in how this program's trajectory is from a championship level standpoint, and particularly defensive recruiting. So being out there and seeing on 300 edge rusher Hayden Lowe commit, seeing one of the top linebackers in the country, Riley Pettijohn, on his official visit. USC's in the top 3 for another coveted linebacker, Noah McHale, who visited this weekend. Getting around some of these other guys that that USC's now trending for, like defensive lineman Floyd Boucard, a native of Canada who's playing at Miami Central. I think he can see with his own eyes and be around the excitement. There were a lot of talented receivers on campus this weekend. USC's got a chance to sign, like Dalen McCutcheon, Andrew Marsh, and Corey Sims.
Yeah.
He can just kind of sense that there's some special brewing potentially here at USC. And we just saw what Washington did. We see where Oregon's at. But USC, when they have it humming with the resources in LA, with Lincoln Riley and his track record, they can be a winner. And so Julian Lewis just getting to feel like, hey, I'm not coming out here and expected to just lead this thing back by myself. We're going to build some talented defenses. They got the new defensive coordinator, Coach Lynn, Coach Henney. Eric Henderson has had as much energy on the recruiting trail as any coach in the country. He's around the building. There's just new juice at USC with these new defensive hires. We know what Lincoln Riley brings to the table. And if they can keep Julian Lewis in the fold, away from Auburn, away from Colorado, who's slated to get the next 2 official visits,
Right.
away from Indiana, who got the first one, exciting. This is an exciting class coming together on USC, and we'll have more on that on 3 later today.
Yeah, and Julian Lewis told me that at some point in July, he plans to inform everybody that he's shutting this thing down. And I think at that point, I mean, he's already helping USC on the recruiting trail, don't get me wrong. But I think at that point, he'll really start building this recruiting class around him.
I've talked to some people that think that Julian Lewis takes his final decision into the fall to watch how some of these teams play, because he's been committed to USC. If he backs off his verbal, it may not even matter, because then games have to be played, right? So I think he kind of takes the DJ Pickett approach and watches how USC plays. Is the new defense on track? How are we recruiting? Are we keeping Isaiah Gibson and Justice Terry in the fold? Who else is committing? Is Auburn on the trajectory up like it feels like they are with that close Iron Bowl loss and some of these recruiting classes they're bringing in? Indiana, Colorado, Coach Prime, are they for real? Can I believe in them even though Shedeur and those guys are going to be gone after the season? Are they showing clear evidence that they're moving forward? I think Julian Lewis goes into the fall.
All right. Well, it is buzzing out there in LA after 19 official visitors. USC fans, let us know how you feeling about this weekend, how you feeling about having Julian Lewis on campus. Seemed like a really exciting time out there in LA. Tap in, let us know, comment section below. All right, we are talking new recruiting prediction machine picks from Steve Wiltfong, and let's start with the Georgia Bulldogs. Now, you did put one in for Christian Garrett, but he's already off the board. The in-state defensive lineman committed to the Dogs on Sunday, but you put in 2 picks for Georgia. The other one, interior offensive lineman Dontrell Glover, who at the time kind of been trending away from FSU, but the Noles still led on his recruiting prediction machine. So now with Georgia, you flipped that pick. What got you to change it?
Well, behind the scenes, I knew how much Georgia coveted him. And when you look at pictures from his official visit this weekend of him and his mother, he looks physically ready to play for Georgia right now. So easy to see why Coach Searles and company covet this in-state talent. But I talked to him after his visit. He said Georgia leads, so easy to put in an RPM. And his quote, "You win, you get looked at by NFL scouts, and it's simple." So he also said, hey, I could have looked at – he mentioned some other SEC schools that he could consider, but he said they're not doing that. So he's not looking at them. He wants to win. He wants to get drafted, and it's simple. So it was simple to put in that Georgia RPM as they try and add to a class that's ranked number 6 right now.
I love when you simplify things for us, Steve. All right, let's head to Tallahassee. Now, Florida State might be trending down for Dontrell Glover, but they are trending up for Ladarian Clarity. He's one of the top safeties in the state of Florida. Why now are you predicting him to the Seminoles?
Well, I talked to him after his visit, and he also said Florida State is his leader. Said as much to my colleague Chad Simmons as well. He talked about Coach Surtain being there, being a big part of that, being a big family over there, the way the players click and bond together. He likes that culture. So coming out of the official visit to Tallahassee this weekend, Florida State is the program to beat. And look, it was a good weekend for Florida, Josh. He wasn't the only guy that Florida State really moved the needle for. This weekend, Zion Grady from Enterprise, Alabama, edge rusher they're battling Miami for, had a phenomenal trip. Max Buchanan, the local offensive lineman who they're battling Clemson, Florida, and others for. He continues to rave about his time on campus. I think Chase Lofton is an on 300 tight end from Nebraska that if you're making me handicap it, I would still maybe give the slight edge to Nebraska. But he said Florida State has set the tone moving forward in his recruitment following his official visit to Tallahassee.
All right, Noles made up some ground on a couple guys over the weekend. Let's head to Alabama, where you are predicting a pair of offensive linemen. Alabama had a bunch of guys on campus as well, but you put in 2 predictions for interior offensive lineman Mal Waldrop and also interior offensive lineman Michael Carroll. What happened at Alabama for them to do so well in the trenches this weekend?
Well, Mal Waldrop, we'll start with him. He said Alabama leads, decision coming soon. He also likes Clemson and Florida, but Alabama's the one to beat for him. He said as much, so easy RPM. Michael Carroll, we wrote back in the spring that Alabama was the program to beat. I'm double downing on that with this prediction following his official visit. Now, Michigan, the biggest challenger, they're slated for an official in 2 weeks, but I just think Alabama – long-standing relationship with new offensive line coach Chris Kapalovic. He was at Michigan State. Michael Carroll's mom played basketball at Michigan State, so there was some early interest in the Spartans. So that's how those two connected. Kapalovic went to Baylor. Carroll wasn't going to go to Baylor, but now that he's at Alabama, they can rekindle that old magic. Kalen DeBoer's track record. And Michael Carroll has just loved his experience around the Alabama players when he's been there. His dad played football at Penn State. They're an iron sharpens iron family, and they feel that at Alabama. Tyler Booker's made a big impression. Defensive players in the spring said, hey, we want you to come to Alabama and make us better in practice. That kind of attitude has Alabama in pole position for Michael Carroll. Also still feeling really good about my Alabama on 3 RPM for top 100 linebacker Dawson Merritt following his official visit, Josh. Nebraska had been trying to swing that one back in their favor, but I'm still riding with the Tide as they work on a potential top 5 class.
All right, couple more RPM picks to run through. Defensive lineman Jalen Williams to Michigan.
Yeah, he was on campus this past weekend. By the time this Wilt Farm whip around goes public, I wouldn't be surprised if he's in the fold. That's how close I think he is to landing with the Maize and Blue, 6'5", 250-pound, traitsy defensive lineman that we've seen Michigan develop so well under the past coaching staff. Nebraska has poured a lot into this recruitment with Jalen Williams, among others, but I think it's Michigan who's trending here. I actually had an early Michigan prediction at my old place of work. I'm double downing on that here at On 3. I like the Maize and Blue for Jalen Williams as they add to a class that's currently ranked number 18. And a bonus nugget there. The jewel of this Michigan class, Josh, is Nate Marshall from Chicagoland also. He's committed to the Wolverines kind of in a surprising fashion. He visited in the spring and quickly jumped in the fold. There was a time where we liked Auburn and Miami better. Now, he had visited Michigan several times, got around Sherman Moore and the coaching staff. That was Coach Moore's first big recruiting win at Michigan. Well, Auburn's trying to flip him. He was at Auburn this past weekend and had a good visit. And there's some confidence around the Plains. He'll be back at Michigan on June 21. Jalen Williams, Nate Marshall, they're buds, and it can't hurt that Michigan is trending for Jalen Williams to help keep Nate Marshall in the fold.
Linebacker Madden Ferriamo, though, you predict him to Notre Dame.
Yeah, good weekend at Notre Dame, number 5 class in the country. Talked to some sources that spent time with Madden Ferriamo. Notre Dame's obviously been one of his top schools. They think that he's the Irish's to lose. Ohio State and others will try and flip that moving forward, but I think there was enough for me to put in the Notre Dame pick. We'll see if I have to change it later, but I like the Irish. The Irish are also hosted Jameer Joseph, an on 300 defensive back who had a fantastic visit. Nathaniel Owusu Boateng took his official visit as well. His brother obviously won the Butkus Award at Notre Dame. Very familiar with the Irish. They're battling Michigan, USC, and Ohio State for him. And this is a big week for Notre Dame as well, as they host Jadon Blair midweek. They host Dylan Robinson midweek, and they host John Anthony Hall midweek. Those 2 receivers, and then one of the prettiest safeties in the country, Jadon Blair. We like Notre Dame for Jadon Blair coming into it. They could be done with their class by the end of the summer. That's the goal. Those are the 6 of the biggest names on the board. We like them for Ferriamo. We'll see what happens with the Wusu, Boateng, and then Jadon Blair or Jameer Joseph. Who's it going to be? I like Jadon Blair right now for Notre Dame, but Michigan and Penn State will try and change that with officials later in the month. But Notre Dame, top 5 class, in the thick of it for some of these elite guys. They want one more dynamic receiver. Will it be Dylan Robinson? Will it be John Anthony Hall? Derek Meadows is out there, who they maybe lead for, but Alabama and Georgia certainly battle, and he was at Georgia this past weekend. But Notre Dame, another fun one to follow as we head into the heart of summer.
All right, there's one more pick I want to go over with you guys, and that is cornerback Darius Dixon. You are predicting him to Penn State.
Another easy one. He said Penn State leads. And Sean Fitz, our colleague over at the Penn State On 3 site, also in the RPM game for Darius Dixon. Had a fantastic visit. The way that Penn State produces defensive backs under the staff, just how immersed into the program James Franklin is. Sometimes head coaches take the CEO approach. James Franklin, his sleeves are rolled up. He's in the trenches with the players, and he really enjoyed that part of his visit too. Wouldn't be surprised if he's in Penn State's class soon. They have the number 16 Hall in America right now.
All right, Steve. Well, this is the Wiltfong Whip Around. So if you got any final thoughts or takeaways from the weekend, take us out of here with it.
Yeah, how about Ohio State adding to the number 1 ranked recruiting class in the country with the number 3 safety, Fahim Delani. He was an Ohio State lean coming into the visit, but Ohio State was able to get into the weeds about why they're so good at developing safeties, and they got it done. So they get Fahim Delani in the fold. Damian Shanklin, the on 300 edge rusher that we have predicted to LSU, had a fantastic visit to Ohio State. I have Jackson Lloyd currently predicted to Alabama, but Ohio State heard that was a great second visit to Columbus. He'll be back at Alabama. USC rounds out the finalists, but Ohio State, Alabama battle, confidence around Tuscaloosa, confidence around Columbus. Will be interesting to see how that shakes out. Still love my prediction for Javon McFadden, a 4-star offensive lineman to Ohio State. Trajan Odom's an on 300 defensive lineman that could also end up a Buckeye. He had another great experience. He was at Ohio State a few weeks ago. So Ohio State, number 1 class in the country, coming off a big weekend, hosted on 300 receiver Quincy Porter, who they have a good shot at as well. So that will do it for today's episode of Wiltfong Whip Around. Thanks for tuning in. Please hit like and subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel. Please make sure you're tuning into all our great shows, the Inside Scoop, the 5-Star Show with Phil Dukes, and then certainly Wiltfong Whip Around. But that's it for today. We'll be back on Thursday previewing some of the biggest recruiting weekends that are going to happen in college football. I know we'll be talking Tennessee, we'll be talking Miami, and look forward to being back on with you guys on Thursday.